Hello, my name is Brad Bodnerchuk, and welcome to the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast, where we discuss everything hospitality, from the food on the plate to the teams that make it happen and the community that drives this industry forward. On this podcast, we sit down and chat with the most exciting, inspiring, and innovative minds that make up one of the most dynamic industries that there is today. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by none other than Rainer Krumsiek from Big Bear Ranch. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, Brad. Nice to see you here.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be back. As I always say to my guests, to the listeners, pardon me, if you're tuning in via audio, go check out the YouTube video as well on my YouTube channel. You can see we are sat in what will no longer be your resting place in Vancouver when you travel here. We'll have to find.
Yeah, will be the last time. Yes. Yeah.
A sad day.
Oh, not really.
No, just onwards and upwards.
Life is about change, right?
Very much so. Very much so.
You don't want to be stuck in the same rut all the time.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So let's give the listeners some context in regards to who you are and why you're here. Pardon me. I'll fill in kind of my story and my background of why I wanted you to be on the show, and then you can kind of let the listeners know who you are and what you do. So I think we agreed it was 7 or 8 years ago
that we met the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, so 7 or 8 years ago, I had read Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma. I'm going to do this really succinct. And in Omnivore's Dilemma, Michael Pollan cites a website called eatwild.com. I went on eatwild.com and I found Big Bear Ranch as a farm listed in BC.
Yeah.
And then I engaged with them. I think it was just... I visited the website, and I almost feel like I didn't even ask any questions. I feel like I just placed my first order. And then from there, everything has grown to now 8 years later, where I visited the farm. I've been a customer of yours for that time, and we've become friends outside of just business transactions. And I'm truly, truly intrigued by what you do, how you do what you do, and why you do what you do. So I'll turn it over to you now and help the listeners understand better what is Big Bear Ranch, why it exists, and why this is your reality.
Okay, I have to start that I'm a landscape architect. So I had training in everything with soil and plants and things like that. And I always loved to be outdoors and to have animals. So we had already Icelandic horses in Germany and a dog. And in 93, we moved to Canada to be even more self-sustainable than we were already in Germany, where we had our own garden, chickens, and I hunted for meat. So the place we found was not what we really were looking for, because we were looking for a smaller parcel, like a quarter or so, close to somewhere in the Okanagan area. So, but everything was so expensive that we ended up in Horsefly after looking at 22 ranches all over the interior. And this place was at that time 2,200 acres, so a little bit more than we thought we
a lot more
wanted to have. But we had the chance to put our own garden in and raise a few pigs and butchered one of our cows of the 2-year-olds for our own meat, and saw how good that was. And always when you invite friends, they ate that meat and they were so impressed that it all took off from there with the pigs, actually. And then in 2003, when BSE came, we had by then a mother cow herd of 250 head, which in summer grazed on crown land. And in winter, we fed the hay, what we originally cut ourselves, to them on our place. But then in 99, I attended the Ranching for Profit school and really learned how much it costs to do your own hay. And that was a big change. So it was cheaper to buy hay than to make your own hay, even if you have 1,000 acres of hayland. Mm-hmm. So we sold all the haying equipment and custom grazed, and that was the best what we could do for the land, because from the money what we got from the custom grazing, we bought hay and fed it on the areas which had the poorest soil. because the system in BC to clear land for agricultural purposes was mostly done by loggers. They logged a piece and then they had to bring it into production, a certain percentage of the area, and then they were allowed to apply for the next agricultural lease. So they just worked this land just as quick as possibly, put it into production, and then could log the next land, and they made lots of money with selling the trees. So agriculture or raising cows was just a sideline for them. So the land was leveled, but they pushed all the topsoil in the deeper spots, in the gullies. So we had really huge areas where there was hardly no topsoil. And with feeding the bought-in hay on these areas, we created topsoil. And you can still see today, 20 years later, what difference it made.
Oh, wow.
And nowadays, it's amazing that we are now in 2019, and already in 1900 and around 1920, Rudolf Steiner was saying these things, what we realize nowadays, that the most important thing is the soil biology. So we have to create life under the surface. And there's more by weight than the cows on top of the surface.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Something that I don't know if we talked about it the last time we met, but I was educated on the maybe it was you actually that brought it to my attention about farming produce and strictly produce, but then rotating the land, not necessarily the crops, but like having livestock then come on to the property and do what they do so naturally, and that actually really benefiting the next season's crops or the produce that they're producing. So can you educate me more, can you articulate it better of the benefit that the soil gets from whether you are a produce farmer or a livestock farmer, but from taking the livestock and rotating them on the land, or even, like I said, if someone traditionally isn't having livestock on their property, how imperative is it for them to introduce, whether it be chickens or cows or pigs, to that land for the soil health, like you were mentioning?
I mean, our really big example is nature itself. There is no area where there is no animals. So this new movement that you shouldn't have cows anymore or no livestock anymore is totally wrong, because then everything will go haywire. You have to realize, if you ate an apple in around 1950, and at that time there was no conventional and certified organic, it was just an apple. And now, if you want to get the same nutrients from a conventional apple nowadays, you have to eat 50 apples.
Oh my God.
50 to 55 apples have the nutrient content of an apple like 70 years ago. And that's with all the produce. And that's because we don't have livestock on the land. So Gabe Brown was a guy who, what you just mentioned, he had a row crop farm in North Dakota, so not a really nice climate. And he went nearly broke because there were a few years of really bad drought and whatever, weather things. So he educated himself and started to put in cover crops. It's a cocktail of at least 15, better 20 to 25 different seeds, and you grow that. And then you get livestock in. He bought 300 cows, graze that down, and that's the secret with all these animals. If it's chicken or pigs or cows, 80 to 90% of what they eat, they poop out, and that's the best fertilizer for your land.
Yeah.
So he did that after 2 or 3 years of cover cropping. Then he grazed this land, and then he turned it back into row crops. And he has like 3,000 acres, so lots of area to play with and cycle it around. And his crops are not really more nutritious, it's also more weight-wise.
More abundant.
His yield is higher than his neighbors who are fertilizing and spraying herbicides and pesticides. And his only input is his management of the cows. And nowadays, where we have electric fences, It's so easy if you grasp the concept of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so important to know that you are not doing ourselves and Mother Earth a favor if you don't eat any meat. You don't have to eat maybe as much as some people do.
Right.
And there are for sure some people who get along without any meat. I'm not,
Not disputing that.
No.
Mm-hmm.
But we really have to have livestock on the land to have fertile soil and nutritious food.
What would be the barriers or the obstacles for someone if they're listening right now and they are predominantly a produce farm, so they're producing things like kale and they are maybe apples or different produce, vegetables and fruits. What would be obstacles that they would face in regards to introducing cattle? Is it as easy as educating yourself on wire fencing and speaking to someone like you as a resource, and then just arranging for these for the livestock to be on the property, or are there other things that are slowing people down from adopting this seemingly very simple process to increase the health of their soil and then give not only themselves but their customers, their consumers, a more beneficial, more nutrient dense product? So what is stopping everyone from doing that?
That's the thing between your ears. That's the biggest obstacle for everybody.
Really?
Yeah, it's to get your mind around to do it, because there will be from 100 people, 99 will say it's not possible in my case. But there's this one guy who does it.
Okay.
So it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to... Alan Nation, he was the editor of the Stockman Grass Farmer. There are two really important publications what you could read if you want to learn about agriculture. That's Stockman Grass Farmer and Acres USA. And Alan Nation said, in every industry, if there's a breakthrough change, it takes 2 to 3 years and everybody is doing the same thing.
Oh, wow.
In agriculture, it takes 2 to 3 generations before the change. And that's with electric fence. You can see it. There's in my area, there's now one other farmer in Horsefly who really uses electric fence. All the others, and altogether they're like 10, 15, still say it doesn't work. And it's a kilometer of barbed wire fence is $12,000. A kilometer of electric fence is $1,200. So it's such a big difference. And you need good fences in order to do management intensive grazing.
So it's an education, or do they already know, they just don't believe it to be true?
It's change. People are afraid of change.
Right. So
you really have to push them, and that's either because they go broke otherwise, or they see really somebody doing it. And I mean, if you mention an orchard, you don't want to put cattle in an orchard.
Okay.
Because they are too heavy, and especially these yew trees, which look to me like a factory farm for pigs. If you see the new apple trees, which is just a spindle, and it's maybe 6, 7 feet high, and then the apple are picked with machines.
Scary.
Yeah, it's no wonder that there's nothing in these apples.
Yeah.
Because the soil between them is bare soil, it's sprayed. And then you look at an older orchard, where you have trees which are in itself beautiful. The ground is covered with forage or grass, and there are sheep or turkeys or chicken grazing. And you can even run once in a while cattle through if you have electric fences, because then you put them in one day.
It's all right. That wasn't me. Was that something in the house?
Okay, so...
We're all good. Keep going.
So the advantage of all these split hoofers is that they really work the dead stuff of the vegetation in the soil and mix it.
Right.
And that's how you create really good topsoil.
Do you feel like there is already a resource for all farmers? Let's just talk about Canada. Let's just talk about BC, to have platforms and have discussions like this. Does it exist? Because I feel like if you're sitting here and you have this knowledge, you have, I'm assuming you have data as well to back up like this, the health of your soil. Like you can show it tangibly what it looks like from having livestock on the property. But is there a platform where people like you come together to share these stories? And is that something that is done often, or are there silos in your industry, in your space, that people kind of just keep to themselves and don't really share ideas and they don't move the industry forward?
There's a very interesting group now since a few years. It's called Young Agrarians.
Mm-hmm.
And it was started out as a platform to bring together older farmers like me who are looking for somebody who really wants to farm and work the land and be outside, and young people who don't have the money to buy it because land is so expensive that they don't have the resources mostly. And that was how this group was started. But we had, like 2 months ago, they call it a mixer, to get together in Williams Lake. And I went there, and it was so amazing. It was a group of 150 people.
Oh, wow.
Mostly young people, maybe 30 older people like me. And pretty much all of them were certified organic or working organic, not necessarily certified.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much vigor in this group and enthusiasm. So that was really uplifting.
And inspiring, I'm sure.
Inspiring, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And do you feel like the people that you interacted with at this meetup, were they of the same mindset in regards to methods of farming? Like, is wire fencing language that they're used to, and that theory is what they've kind of bought into? Do they understand the benefits of having livestock on land? Have they already had that paradigm shift, or is there still work to be done with even the new enthusiastic young agrarians?
There is definitely still work to be done. I mean, what we did, my wife and me, from the beginning on, we went not every year, in the beginning, actually every year, either to a Stockman Grass Farmer Conference or Acres USA Conference. And especially these Acres USA conferences, they are huge. They are like 1,000, 1,200 people from all over the world. Very good speakers. And there's also 2 days before the actually conference, what they call the Ag University,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a full day. Let's say the last very interesting thing for me was Mark Shepard. He does, how does he call it? Restorative agriculture.
Okay.
And it was so funny. On the way back from the conference, I flew over his 164-acre parcel, and the whole area is either brown, dried out,
Mm-hmm.
or round green spots if they have a center pivot. And then you see this square, totally vibrant green plot, which is his land.
Wow.
And he does, it's called a yeoman's keyline thing. If you imagine you have a hillside and there's always some kind of gullies where the water runs down.
Yeah.
So he puts dams in this hillside to hold off the runoff water from winter, from spring,
Mm-hmm.
or rainwater. And then he plows horizontally to both sides a furrow. So from this water reservoir, the water goes back into the hillsides.
Oh, wow.
And that's all he does. He has no center pivot, no irrigation, but his land is green as if would be irrigated. And it has the same rainfall like all his neighbors, which are totally dried out. And if you think about that, humans who are supposed to have a brain are irrigating and drilling deeper and deeper and deeper and taking more water out of the aquifer than it's replenishing every year.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you want to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same like if you think about our government giving trillions to the petroleum industry, and we know it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but they still do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting when you say it like that in regards to this gentleman who is living on such a vibrant land and his neighbors are not. You would think that you would, if you're the neighbor, maybe adopt what your neighbor is doing.
yeah, and that's what I say. This change in agriculture is not by seeing that he is doing it. I just had a ride in my car from a German young guy. And he is exactly on the same plate like I was, and he is educating himself and everything. And his dad is 56 and is running the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why are you not doing this? He said, I have to wait until dad goes away. He cannot convince his own dad to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the paradigm shift for you, or did there have to be one? Have you always been of this mindset? Did you always think that this was the way it should be done, or did you yourself have to kind of have a tipping point moment where you had that aha moment, if you will? Or has this always been kind of part of you, whether you're landscaping or whether you're farming? Have you always had this, and I'll just put words in your mouth, like care for the land or care for the future, or just these broader ideas? Has that always been who you are, or was that a process for you as well?
I think my upbringing was a very big part of that. We lived in town, in a 500,000 people town in Hanover, but every weekend and later on when I went to school, every school holidays I spent at my grandparents' place in the countryside, and they had a huge garden. They lived from their garden because they were bombed out during World War II, and that's how they made a living then.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent every free hour where I didn't have to help in the garden, in the forest, watching animals and just feeling well there. And that's so interesting. Today they call it forest bathing.
Yeah.
And it's still, if I feel down, I just have to walk through I have a area where there's really like 150, 200-year-old Douglas fir. You feel better right away. It's amazing what influence this has.
Yeah, I think forest bathing, I've heard it described as biophilia. So I think it's like an actual scientific thing they're proving now.
Yeah.
But something I'm very, and you can call it what you want. You can call me silly, you can call me whimsical, but I truly feel like we are all connected, meaning like you and I, meaning me and the tree that I'm looking at outside. Like there is a connection there. And it is silly for us not to take a moment, if you have the opportunity, if your environment allows it, to connect with nature. Take your shoes off and feel the grass in your feet and get your hands dirty, all those things. There's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah. Let me finish that
what
you asked me.
Yes.
So that was my upbringing, that I always really valued nature and being in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And my big advantage being a farmer now is that I'm not born as a farmer's son. I came from outside with different knowledge, with this landscaping knowledge, to the farming side. So I didn't have all these things what a farmer's son has to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, from the beginning we attended these conferences and schools where you learned from really, it's like 2% of the farmers who go to these conferences and learn from them. And that's what our advantage. What we learned was from these guys who are on the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it is your responsibility to be that voice, to do things like this, come onto podcasts and speak to your customers and speak to the young agrarians? Do you feel like it is your duty now to fly that flag and teach and educate?
Yeah, I would like to have more time for that. I'm still too much involved in my own operation, and since my wife passed away 6 years ago, I'm by my own.
Mm-hmm.
Have big help from my son and his wife, but she's a large animal vet with a full-time job and a kid. And Florian has his construction business, which is taking off. Too good for my good, because he has no time for the ranch anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore I joined this young agrarian group, because I'm really looking forward to young couples who want to work on the land, who want to raise poultry and say, yeah, we raise poultry, but we butcher them also.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the reason why I don't have poultry. There is no butcher facility. It's too far away, so you don't make any money raising poultry. And this area, what we have there, is all around one watershed. So when my wife was sick, we sold 1,150 acres and kept 600 acres between Florian and me, but it's at the bottom of this hill.
Mm-hmm.
So everything what happens on top will affect us. And last year somebody put an offer in, a conventional farmer, and luckily it didn't went through. And now my offer to buy it back was just rejected because I said the financing is possible in 2020, procession day in May, and they said it's too late. They want it sooner. So I have to find out something.
When did this happen?
Just a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are the next steps then? Sorry, educate me. What do we have to do next?
My next step is to find out how I get the money together to. It's $1 million. What
$1
we
million?
need. Yeah, and the bank for agriculture purposes needs 50% down payment.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just to prove that you can pay the interest and the
payments.
Yeah, what do you call it? Interest, and the other thing is the principal.
Principal, yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to raise $1 million.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that. Well, we've talked about before. You and I have talked about different things you could do in regards to like memberships.
Yeah.
With the customers that you have. Have you looked into that further or no? And
I'm
now
still working on it, and I have now my concept kind of ready. So I want to discuss it with Steffi and Florian because they are a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I think it should work because there's so many possibilities on this land. I mean, I just mentioned the poultry. Everybody asks for poultry. Then you could do mushrooms, you could do veggies,
endless
honey.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Gorgeous
mean,
honey.
we sell honey from a friend who has a really clean place far up from any road or something, but it would be better, it would be from our place. We have a neighbor who has 2 hives there, but it's not enough to sell right now, so it has to be more. And that's why I mentioned Mark Shepard. With our hillside, we have the same thing. We could put tons of dams in, kept the water on the place. In spring, we have rivers running in every direction. And right now, 2 weeks ago, we got stuck because it was so mucky. And now when I left a huge cloud of dust behind me, which was already too dry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's every year the climate is really changing. You can see it. Every year we have now like 3-4 weeks of really hot, high winds, which dries out the soil like nothing. And it's already fire ban in our area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What has been the biggest change in the environment that you've seen since you've been in Williams Lake? Like in regards to weather patterns? Like what is? I mean, you just mentioned one there, but anything else that's quite tangible and quite shocking?
I think what everybody will realize is if you think about 20 years ago when you were driving, your windshield and your car was covered with bugs. And now, I came the day before yesterday from Horsefly to here, which is like altogether like I'm driving through the Okanagan like 850 kilometers. I have maybe 5 bugs on my windshield.
Wow.
It's all killed.
Right.
I mean, here big signs, they're spraying for the moths, and in our area they're spraying for the beetles. I mean, for sure these animals damage the trees.
Right.
But it's nature's way of taking some trees out and regenerating. I mean, we all have to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So
what
doesn't
is,
help if we poison more and more and more.
So what do we need to be doing? And I know that's a very broad question, but from an agriculture standpoint, what do we need to be doing to not just be sustainable but thrive? What needs to be done in your opinion?
I met Lana Popham, the agriculture minister, on this young agrarian mixing, and she is really, I think she's up to what we need. She is energetic and has the right ideas. And what I think is, when I mentioned these conferences, to go to a conference like that, it's mostly in the States and not even close. It's down in Texas or somewhere.
Right.
So it's every time $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to go there. Not everybody can afford that. So we either have to sponsor young people who are willing to go, that the ministerium has a program that they can fly and attend these conferences, or we have to bring up these speakers here. Some of them, like Joel Salatin, he was here a few times already. And if you hear people like that in person and see what they are doing, then it will help you change your mind and get on the same bandwagon, right?
So it's like it's an exposure thing. It's an education thing. It is bringing people together, the community together, to discuss what we need to be doing to be more responsible for our land. And something I heard, I just actually attended a symposium in Toronto, more based around hospitality and restaurants. But obviously a lot of the chefs now are talking about sustainability in our world, in our communities. But one person got up and spoke, and I've forgotten his name, I do apologize, but he actually challenged it. Like, why are we focused on sustainability? Like, if you and I were in a business, we wouldn't want to just have a business that's sustained. We want to have a business that's thriving. So he challenged people to have a mindset of what can we do, what can we be doing, not to ensure sustainability, but to ensure abundance and that we can thrive, which I thought was interesting, because we hear the term sustainability so often, but can we not ask more from ourselves and from each other to allow for our environment to be much healthier than just sustainable?
I totally agree, but I think it developed because conventional agriculture is destroying.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step is to stop destroying. That was this sustainability.
True. Yeah.
Sustainability, and then they came up with regenerative.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you have to make a profit, otherwise you can do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are doing on our place, and therefore the profit is not really what it should be, we invest too much in improving the land. Like, I built already like 25 ponds. We create areas in the forest where we, you look at the brush and what is growing there, so you know there's better topsoil.
Mm-hmm.
So you take out areas like that and create meadows in the forest, because the most productive area in every environment is always on the edge. That's called the edge effect.
Okay.
So in the middle of a pasture is not as many critters like at the edge of the pasture. And in the middle of the forest, sometimes there is nothing because there's no light.
Mm-hmm.
But at the edge, that's life. So if you create these meadows going through, you have more grazing area, you have more
edges.
wildlife, more edges.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a chance to run my electric fences, temporary electric fences, even in my woods, and can graze my woods one day at a time. The cattle are in one area, and then next day they're in another area. So they break down old brush and stuff like that, and they have access to lots of leaves and forbs, what is not in a pasture. But all these plants have way deeper roots, so they get other minerals and nutrients.
It seems like, again, it just seems so simple. Like, why would we not all be doing it?
Yeah, it is simple, but it's a change. So therefore, it's not so easy to do.
Yeah. I believe I mentioned this to you before, but I may not have. I met with Jill Azanza. Jill Azanza owns K&M Farms in Abbotsford. So it's a poultry farm. She farms chickens and turkey. And she actually said on record, which I was kind of surprised by, she said, "I wish that everyone would stop eating so much chicken," which I thought was so counterintuitive for someone that sells chicken to say stop eating so much chicken. But the reason she had voiced that on the podcast was it is the demand that we are putting on, we being society at large, that we're putting on the industry that's fueling essentially conventional farming. Like, because of how much meat we eat as a society, it's fueling the need for production such as conventional farming. So her opinion and her thought is, if we eat less meat less often, you probably can afford to eat meat like from Big Bear Ranch or poultry from K&M Farm, and it would allow for that type of farming to be the type and to thrive. Do you agree, disagree with that statement or that paradigm?
First of all, I would like to have it changed to, I wish people wouldn't eat so many factory farm chickens.
Right, true.
So look for the right kind of chicken, because if they would do that, there would be more demand for that.
True.
And it would show the big industry, we are out. We don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing is, if you eat a real chicken or a real piece of meat from beef or pork, it not only tastes better, it has so many more nutrients that you really get away with way less.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, my butcher always puts steaks 2 in a pack. So I'm by myself. So I have to thaw out a package, and one I freeze in right away,
Mm-hmm.
back, and the other one I cut in half and eat it this day and the next day or the
Okay.
day after, because if you keep it in your fridge,
Yeah.
it's good for a week or so.
Mm-hmm.
And people are not really educated. They think they cannot take meat out of the freezer and wait until you can cut it and put some back in the freezer. They say, oh no, we cannot do it, it's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wrong, it is safe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you shouldn't put it in the sun, right?
Right.
Or let flies get to it.
Right.
But if you do it in a proper way, it's safe.
Yeah, I think again, all of this is just an education. I feel like it's so great that I was able to have you back onto the podcast, because these are conversations that I need to be a part of, but also I feel like the listeners need to hear. And then whether or not you take what Rainer is saying for gospel, at least take it upon yourself then to do some more research and go down that rabbit hole of looking at it and challenging it. Sorry, you want to say something?
The problem is if you do your research about, let's say, frozen meat, then you
Okay.
come on this government webpage,
Right.
which says pork is only good for 6 months in the freezer, or beef 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also totally wrong. I mean, we have our own experiences with our own freezers before we sold meat.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife found a pork roast with a fat rind around,
Mm-hmm.
which was 5 years old. And
Oh my God.
yeah, we thought it out. And it had no off taste, nothing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a chest freezer. It's not a freezer, in your fridge,
Right.
because they are often not cold enough. I really have to mention that
Yes,
point.
yes, please. Yeah, so
So-
cite that again. So you talked about that before about the
If
the
you have a
temperature.
chest freezer, you'd set it on your lowest temperature, that it is colder than 18, better 21 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
My walk-in freezer is -25 all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that meat, that roast was so perfect, and that was extreme. I mean, that's in the chest freezer what happens. You don't find it in time, and then when you clean it out, you find some old stuff.
Yeah.
But 6 months is totally wrong, for
Mhm.
what they say on the government webpage. And I think all these regulations, I think it's proven, they come from the big industry, because they don't want you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they kill the small guys, and that's how they killed all the abattoirs. I mean, and it will change now. Lana Popham really just said that they want to bring more abattoirs back.
Well, good.
Yeah,
We need that.
like I think it was 5-6 years ago when most of them shut down because they had to such ridiculous regulation changes
Mm-hmm.
that most people couldn't afford to put that in. So they were older, so they just shut down.
Hmm.
So now I have to drive with my animals 3 hours to a good butcher
Mm-hmm.
whom I trust, and where I get my meat back, meat from my own animals.
Right.
But I always do it myself. So when I arrive there, I have to wake up the pigs. They are sleeping in the trailer. I
Mhm.
put lots of hay in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you not open the door and they run out. No, they're laying there. And,
So they're relaxed,
they're totally relaxed. Yeah,
which is how it should be.
yeah, yeah.
Right. But still, it'd be better if the abattoir was 30 minutes away as opposed to 3 hours.
In Europe, certified organic farms, some of them have a permit now that they can shoot the animals on the pasture.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to bleed them there, which is good because that's a lot of nutrients which goes back in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to hoist them up in a stainless steel container in the back of the tractor
Mm-hmm.
and drive them to the abattoir. That's possible because they mostly have only 20-30 minutes drive to an abattoir, so you can do that with a tractor.
Right.
And then there the animal gets inspected and processed or aged
Mhm.
until they cut it.
Right.
And that's what we need here. We need the permit that we can do this on our place. I mean, nobody ever got sick from meat what he bought from a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
All these meat recalls, that's meat from the factories,
True.
from the huge companies.
Yeah, and it's so counterintuitive, and I really hope that conversations like this, and I hope that more farms like yours are celebrated and highlighted and that people are able and open to being educated on where their food comes from and asking more questions. And the cool thing about, if I can say, about getting to know you over the last 8 years now, and now considering you a friend, even before that, when I visited the farm, that for me was such an interesting and unique experience. I had never done that before, where I was able to actually see where the product that I was buying was living and was thriving. And that was so important to me at the time, but even more important now, to know that the meat that I'm serving my body and my partner's body and now our daughter is coming from a great source. That gives me a lot of pride, but it also gives me a lot of assurance as well. So I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate the priorities that you have when it comes to your farming techniques. And I can't speak for all of your customers, but I will try, and I'll say thank you so much for doing what you do, because it is making a difference. And I'm sure at times it gets frustrating because the sea of change is a very slow one, but it is the work you're doing now, the dominoes you're pushing over now, that will affect big change in the future. So you and I may not see it spread broadly before our time is done here, but I would like to think that when my daughter is my age or your age, that the world will look a lot different when it comes to farming and where people get their food. So thank you for leading this as much as you possibly can.
Brad, I always also have to thank you that you are doing this, because I think there are two really important things what we have to do. One is education, and that you're doing a great job doing that.
Thank you.
And the other one is repopulation of the countryside. And I want to buy all this land back for Big Bear Ranch to be able to serve my customers in the future with healthy meat and hopefully also produce and other things, what we can do, and even offer them a chance to stay there. We want to put cabins in.
Oh, perfect.
That they really can stay there for a while, and if they want to help or if they just want to relax, whatever. But I figured out, because a big point is, like people like me, I cannot really retire even if I want to, because my pension is too small. If the government would use 0.5% of the budget, it's 0.5%, they could pay every farmer who is older than 65, and I would say that's important, farmed longer than 20 years.
Right.
A pension on top of what he has already of $30,000 or $40,000 a year. It's such a minuscule percentage of the budget, but that would really make it possible that young people can come and can farm.
Right.
Because then the old guy can say, okay, I can let go.
Well, fingers crossed. And like you said, with Lana Popham, hopefully she's doing everything she can to affect some positive change as well.
So,
it sounds like it. I've been actually trying to get her onto the podcast, so fingers crossed I can get her on. I think she'd be great. She'd be a great guest.
Yeah.
As you know, Rainer, this podcast is called the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast. We did this last time, but we're going to do it again. I have for you two questions that I ask every single guest. The first one is the half a dozen have-tos. So if you recall, what I need from you is 1 to 6 items. You can do 1 or you can do 6 of things you've experienced in your life that you feel like our listeners have to experience, whether it's a trip you've taken, a meal you've eaten, a piece of art you've looked at, a book you've read, anything that you feel like can be related to farming or not, but something you've experienced in your life that you feel like our listeners have to experience. 1 to 6 things.
I don't remember that we did that before.
That's okay. It was a while ago.
I don't even know what I said.
Yeah, you know what? I forget as well. Again, you can do 1 or you can do 6. I know you've read a lot of books. You're constantly reading articles.
Yeah, definitely reading is one of the biggest things, and get together with like-minded people. Yeah.
Anything else?
Take time to relax, enjoy what you have. That's, I think, really, really important.
And what about, I feel like something that maybe isn't top of mind for you right now or on the tip of your tongue, but asking more questions of your food. And something that you, the reason I brought that up is because something that you cited to me, I forget the name of it, where it measures...
Brix meter.
Yeah, Brix meter. Can you educate me again and the listeners on what the Brix meter is and why you have one?
A Brix meter is an instrument where you put a drop of plant sap on a glass, and then you look through and you can see the amount of nutrients. And there's a table on the internet where you can see for every different veggie or fruit, what the desired level is. And let's say you have a grass, it should be at least 18, can be up to 30, depending on your mixture. And if you have a fertilized grass, it's mostly around 4 or 6. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So get a Brix meter and check the salad that you're eating and see what those leaves actually score.
Yeah. You can really check the produce you buy on the farmer's market or in the store and see if it's worth your money to buy certified organic or buy the other stuff.
Right. The last question I have for you is the half a dozen haven't yet. Things you have yet to experience in your life. For lack of a better term, a bucket list. So 1 to 6 things that you've yet to experience. I know travel has been something you've been doing a lot more over the last few years. So is there somewhere where you haven't been yet that you want to go to? Is there a book you haven't read that you want to read? Is there a politician you haven't been able to speak to that you want to speak to? What would be some of your haven't yets?
I think I'm totally happy.
That's good. You know what? I've had a few guests where that is their answer, and I think you have to be in a certain place to be able to say that. So I appreciate you being honest and saying you're good. I do want to say
maybe I can put one thing in here.
Yeah, go.
I wish I had a electric delivery van.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
Yeah. I just looked at the Sprinter here from Spatz.
Yeah.
And I was reading Mercedes and Tesla was developed this thing with an electric thing. And that would be good. You know, don't drive a truck with a diesel and pull a trailer. Just have your van and
yeah. Maybe a fleet of electric vans at some point for Big Bear Ranch with a nice branding on it, and people can see it all over the Lower Mainland.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to take a moment and just say thank you again so much, Rainer. I do appreciate you coming back on the show. For those of you that are listening and wondering what I mean when I say that is we actually recorded an episode months ago, but due to some technical difficulties or due to my difficulties, unfortunately the file didn't work. So we are back again, and I appreciate you making time for me. It really means a lot. And I want to say thank you so much for becoming a friend, someone who I consider a friend, a trusted resource, someone who I know I can always come to with questions when it comes to this type of stuff. And I always appreciate you taking time for me and allowing me to ask you anything when it comes to food and farming. And I really do appreciate you being so vulnerable and coming on the show today. And lastly, thank you for doing what you do. It'd be very easy for you not to do this. It'd be very easy for you to do landscaping or do something else or just mail it in and travel or do something. But you are, for some reason, day in and day out, still moving forward. And that is very important, not only for me as your friend and as a customer, but also for the hundreds of customers that you have, but also for our earth and our environment. So again, I appreciate you. And I feel like people like you need to be highlighted more often. And it will happen. And I hope that I can somehow facilitate that, not even just this podcast, but some way, shape, or form, bringing more light to people like you and what you're doing. So thank you again for your tireless work in this industry.
I also want to thank you again, because I think that's so important what you are doing here. And with one thing I disagree. That's when you said maybe me and you won't experience this big change. I think this big change is coming way faster than we all think.
Good. I'm glad you feel that way.
I'm really, I don't know if I really experience it, but you for sure will experience it, and your daughter 100%.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
Look at the greens. And I say it here, I'm voting greens since ever, and I'm not scared of all this bullshit with the lost voice. You have to vote what you believe in.
True.
And that's a change has to come, and that change has to save the earth and not some big corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my final word.
Okay, I appreciate that. Before we do sign off officially, if people want to get in touch with you and Big Bear Ranch, how best they engage with you? If they want to place orders, how best they do that?
The best is go on the internet, bigbearranch.com, look at the webpage, and I just heard from a lady yesterday. She ordered way back meat, and then she got a vegetarian, and now she has a boyfriend, and she wants to convince him to eat good meat, so she ordered again.
Oh, amazing.
And she said before she did that, she looked at a ton of web pages, and she was convinced we are still on top of the line, so she ordered again from us, and that was really good to hear.
Yeah, amazing story.
Yeah, so bigbearranch.com.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as you do week after week. I truly appreciate it. If you are an omnivore, if you do eat meat, please do check out Big Bear Ranch if you're local here in BC. If you're not local and you are across Canada or North America, or if you're in Europe or wherever you are, I implore you, go talk to your farmers, ask questions, do farm visits, and just demand more of yourself when it comes to the food that you eat and put in your body, and do what you can to make our environment a better, safer, more thriving place. Agreed?
Very good. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next week for a brand new episode. Until that time, be good and do good. That's it. We did it. Thank you.
Brad.
You did great.